What's going on, all you Minties? This is the Uncanny Omar from Near Mint Condition, and welcome to another Top 20 list. Today I'm going to be talking about my Top 20 Most Wanted X-Men Omnibus. So, please stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody. Now, I've done a Top 20 Most Wanted Marvel Omnibus, a Top 20 Most Wanted DC Omnibus, and I'll be working on my Most Wanted Batman Omnibus and my Most Wanted Absolute Editions and Gallery Editions. And today I'm focusing on X-Men related books, so not just sticking to Uncanny X-Men or Adjectiveless X-Men. And anything that has to do with mutants is what I'm talking about here. I limited myself to 20, which was a lot more difficult than I thought it was going to be, but this is just my personal list, and in the description of the video, I'll be leaving what my countdown list is, like I did with my previous videos. Now, I did this video a couple of years ago, and some of them have come out, right? Which is wonderful. That's great. So maybe we'll see a few of these sometime in the future. Maybe not. Maybe it's just my wishful thinking. But let me know what your top 20 would be, your top 5, your top 10, or even your top 1, what your most wanted X-Men related omnibus would be. Don't forget to share the video if you are enjoying the content of this channel. Now, let's go ahead and get started. By the way, I did something that I should have done with the other two videos, but I'll be doing from now on, and that is choosing the standard edition cover and direct market cover, unless there's going to be a new artist or a new take on a classic cover like we've had in the past, but these I've just chosen throughout these runs. So you'll see the very first cover will be your standard edition cover, and then the second cover you see when I'm talking about these specific omnis will be your direct market cover. So if you have any in mind, by all means, please let me know. And sometimes it was a lot more harder than I thought, because you have to envision, like, okay, if this is an X-Men related book, these characters have to show up. It just can't be one character, but then, you know, sometimes the artist or the specific piece of art would overrule that. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. So, it's a countdown. Number 20, Ultimate X-Men. That's right, this is a series I'm really surprised we've never had in Omnibus edition. We've had the oversized hardcovers, we've had Ultimate collections, we've had trade paperbacks, but with the popularity of everybody demanding or wanting the Ultimate Spider-Man run, I figured now would be a good time to get this book out there. You've got artwork in there by Adam Kubert, Andy Kubert, Joe Kubert drawing an issue with his two sons, and then of course Mark Millar kicking off this line. So I would include the Chris Bachalo Ultimate War storyline. It's a 4-issue miniseries in there. Number 19, X-Man. Now this is the one that I found really hard to find covers for, that just, I thought, okay, well, we've had Steve Skroce, he kicked off the series, and if you see the content, which I'm putting down here, you'll see that I did start off with material from Age of Apocalypse, as well as his first 4 issues, which all takes place during the Age of Apocalypse, but I feel like you would, as a completist, I would not want to miss those first 4 issues and not kick it off with issue number 5. But I did include material from X-Men Prime in there. Now, what I found difficult to find is just the encompassing the artist that did this. So you kicked it off with Steven Skroce, and then Roger Cruz came over and took over the run. And Roger Cruz kind of changed some of his art style through this run. He went more and more and more towards a Joe Mad art style. But I also included stuff in here from Onslaught and Avengers 400, as well as the crossover with Amazing Spider-Man 420. Number 18. With the popularity of All New Wolverine and how well that book sold, I figured now's the good time to give us X-23, the early years. And I'm pretty sure this is going to be a total of 2 omnis, just considering the page count and the amount that's collected here. But Laura is a pretty popular character, and people that have read All New Wolverine probably got to know her, that she's more than a clone. But this is where her story really starts out. It really starts out with the pages of NYX, even though the character is really nothing like that when she appears next. I also included a couple of issues of Uncanny X-Men in there, because that's where you see her show up, and, you know, she starts developing her own character. Now, I did not include any issues of X-Force, Kyle and Yost, but we may see that on the list. Number 17, my first Elseworld, my first What If, my first alternate reality title, and that is Mutant X. So Mutant X really was a spin-off at the last minute, I want to say, title from X Factor. During Howard Mackey's years of X Factor, X Factor 149 came out, ended with a cliffhanger. They advertised X Factor 150, and then they decided to cancel the title and just go a different path. And that is what this was. So it's a story of Alex Summers, Havoc, being transported to another dimension. Love those kind of stories. That's where Bloodstorm shows up. You have a different Madeline Pryor show up there. And that's what this is. This could all be done in one omnibus. Number 16, Messiah Complex. Now, Messiah Complex is one that we've done a Map My X for. I have a lot of fun with my friends doing that, even though we disagree sometimes or agree. I did go back to my original mapping in this instead of the mapping that we used for that episode, and that's including the issues of Cable, because I feel like Messiah Complex and Second Coming could be done in a 2 omnibus set. But let's kick it off with Messiah Complex. Because if we're not going to reprint the Messiah Complex OHC, I figured, well, let's make it an omnibus. And how do you make it an omnibus? Well, let's fatten it up. Let's put issues of Cable in there that are necessary for you to, well, not 100% necessary, but in order for you to enjoy Second Coming a little bit more. So that's why I included them in here. And this was really fun to look through because there's, for covers, because there were a lot of art. There was a lot of art in there by David Finch, and in the end, I did not go with David Finch's art. I just went with Mark Silvestri's. Number 15, Excalibur Volume 3. Another series that was in our Map My X. And I did go with the mapping that we chose for in the Map My X episode. And I'll put a link in the description of the video if you want to watch that. It's where my friends and I get together to talk about what could the mapping be for these books if we were given the task to map these omnis out. Now, this is a pretty interesting era of Excalibur because you have a bunch of fill-in artists, a lot of crossovers here, and then you also have the first part of Warren Ellis's run. So that's what I included in all of this. And I also included the Starjammers in here because that was all by Ellis, and it's got beautiful artwork by Carlos Pacheco. Now, the cover that I went with, it is the part of the Fatal Attractions cover, but I figured that we could put that original piece of Nightcrawler art by Joe Mad instead of the holographic card that they gave us. I thought that would make a really cool cover. Number 14, X-Men, Trial of Gambit, or you could call it the Onslaught Aftermath, or the Joe Mad Omnibus. Whatever you decide to call it, let's get these issues collected. So this is the era after the Onslaught event, and it also leads up into the other crossovers like Hunt for Xavier, or the Magneto, oh my goodness, what is that called? The Magneto War. So this is pretty much Joe Mad's last hurrah with X-Men. Scott Lobdell ends up leaving the book. As a matter of fact, he just plots issue 350, which, as some of you all know, is one that I did not like because it's a horrible retcon, but as an X-Men completist, it's part of the X-Curse. You gotta deal with those. It does have wonderful artwork here by Joe Mad. And I included issues of one-shots like X-Men Crimson Dawn or Archangel in there, which was just a one-shot, as well as the Magneto 1-4, which is the miniseries that kind of sets up the Magneto War later on. Now, number 13, more Gambit, and that is the Gambit Classic. Didn't even plan for that to be above the other. So, Gambit seems to be a very popular character to this day. His popularity never died off. I really thought he was going to be a fad growing up. I was like, oh, he looks cool because Jim Lee designed him cool. And he wore a trench coat. That's going to go away after a year. No. People really enjoy. I mean, for a while, we were going to have a Gambit movie. So the big chunk of this is the Fabian Nicieza run that I don't hear people often talk about, but it is solid. So much solid that he made Scalp Hunter one of my favorite characters, and Scalp Hunter was one of the Marauders. And what does he go by now? Grey Crow, I think. He doesn't go by Scalp Hunter anymore. But I think it now would be a good time to get this book out because eventually we could get a Rogue Omnibus out of this. New Mutants Volume 3. Of course I'm putting this on here. After the announcement of Volume 2, which is coming out later this year, I feel like we need Louise Simonson's run collected in omnibus format. And of course, if you're noticing the issues here, you just have one cover by Rob Liefeld, and then the next omnibus would completely be nothing but Rob Liefeld stuff. But I put in the issues of Power Pack, and I also included, because of our Map My X, the Truth or Dare miniseries, because I feel like it's one about time-displaced characters. It's only a 3-issue miniseries, and it takes place during this era, and I don't see them adding them anywhere else, and I hate orphaned issues, and it was only a 3-issue miniseries. Number 11, X-Men by Mike Carey. It was so difficult to come up with this list because there's so many books that I really want collected in omnibus format. I almost went with the Kieron Gillen run, but instead I went with Mike Carey because I feel like Mike Carey's run is so important, especially if you're reading the Hickman's X-Men during the Dawn of X and Reign of X. There's a lot of things that Mike Carey built that Hickman ended up using. So it does start off with the adjectiveless X-Men, and then when the title changes over to X-Men Legacy, I would put that in there as well as the crossover with Wolverine Origins and Original Sin. There's a lot of great stories in here. It does take place during the Messiah Complex, or the X-Men Legacy is kicked off by Messiah Complex, and if you've noticed my mapping, I did leave that part out, the Messiah Complex, because hey, you're probably going to buy the Messiah Complex Omnibus. That doesn't exist. Number 10, House of M. Of course, some people ask me why I left this off of my Most Wanted Marvel Omnibus. Well, because I had plans to put it here. Regardless of how I feel about the story, the artwork really is a big factor for me here. There's some beautiful... For the main series, you've got Oliver Copiel. And then you've got Alan Davis. You've got Mike Deodato Jr. You have a lot of talent that goes into so many of these little one-shots and mini-series. Now, while the mini-series really at times don't feel like, hey, this doesn't feel like the same character I'm reading about in the main event, they're a lot of fun. I really had fun with that Spider-Man by Mark Waid. But I even included the one-shots in here, or the issues of like Captain America and Black Panther that crossed over into that world of House of M. And both covers, I've always loved that cover by Joe Quesada of Wanda just falling apart with a Tetris blocks. Love that cover. That's your DM. Alright, X-Men Omnibus Volume 3, or what I initially called X-Men Volume 2.5, but somebody suggested the title The Lost Years. Love that. I love that. So that I can't remember who it was, but I love The Lost Years. That sounds a lot better than 2.5. So this is the era of X-Men. Right after the series got canceled, believe it or not, X-Men was not always popular, but it got canceled, and so it's between that era of X-Men when it got canceled and Giant Size #1 when it was relaunched a few years later. So this is where you'll see Hank McCoy become the blue hairy beast, gray at first, but then blue fur, and then you'll see Magneto appear in issues of Defenders, the Avengers. You'll see where the X-Men are hanging out while the series was canceled. So I feel like that's important. And the most important thing that I wanted to add in here was the John Byrne X-Men The Hidden Years. Because while we have collections that are now out of print of the trade paperbacks of those, we don't have anything in oversized format. So I thought, yeah, let's put that in there. I almost put Season 1, but I think while Hidden Years does feel like a big fanfic, I feel like it's a lot more in continuity than Season 1. Number 8. Another alternate reality, and that is Exiles Volume 1. I love this series. Judd Winnick kicked it off. As a matter of fact, I think this is just mainly the Judd Winnick run here. But I would definitely include the 4-issue miniseries of Blink, which happened, and it's kind of a precursor to this because that's where she gets to meet one of the characters that gets to travel with them. So this is, think Quantum Leap, but a group of 6 characters of dimensionally displaced X-Men characters that have to fix time or whatever dimension they're in. And it's almost like a mix between Quantum Leap and Suicide Squad because not a lot of them make it out by the end. There's always a change in the cast of characters that have to travel through these different dimensions. Number 7, as a completist, how has this not come out yet? Road to Onslaught. So Road to Onslaught would map out perfectly right after the Age of Apocalypse with X-Men Avengers Onslaught. And we've had complete collections of this, but if we put that in there, if we get this omnibus, we almost have everything between the very first X-Men #1 and Onslaught, which is crazy. But I'm surprised it hasn't happened. Now, I would put X-Men Prime in here 100%, because I don't think... I'll have to double check, because in Age of Apocalypse Companion, I don't think it's all in there. X-Men Prime is not all in there. If it is, by all means, please omit that so we can have less page counts. But that's that's one that I'm surprised we haven't had yet. And I also snuck in things in there like X-Men and The Brood, which is a freaking awesome story. And look at this DM cover that I've chosen. This is huge. This is the big fight between Storm and Callisto. Well, yes, they fought before, but this is the rematch, and this introduces us to the character of Marrow, who plays an important role later on in Uncanny X-Men. But I love this cover, and, you know, the artwork is amazing, and the story was actually pretty good. This rematch was a pretty good storyline. Number 6. X-Force by Kyle and Yost. Oh my gosh, yes, hell yes. This series was so awesome. Now, while I think most people enjoyed Uncanny X-Force more, I was a bigger fan of this series. You have artwork in there by Mike Choi. You have artwork in there by Clayton Crane. Freaking awesome. The story is so badass. This is actually when I started really enjoying the character of X-23 and the dynamic between her and everyone else. You take someone pure like Rain, one of the members of X Factor or New Mutants originally, and I hated the fact that they had to pull her from X Factor Investigations, because I remember reading about that and I'm like, there's no way I'm going to enjoy this book. I don't give a crap about this book. They're pulling one of my favorite characters to do this. That is ridiculous. But it worked. And in the end, oh my gosh, it was so good. So I did include the X Necrosha in there, as well as part of that crossover. Because like I said, in my head, I think there will be a Second Coming Omnibus if we do a Messiah Complex Omnibus. Number 5, Generation X Volume 1. So while this one doesn't seem that big, I feel like this one is the very first omnibus of a possible 3. We have artwork in there by Chris Bacalo and, of course, the co-creator, Scott Lobdell. But this is pretty much Scott Lobdell's first couple of years on Generation X. I also included a couple material from the Phalanx Covenant. I hate double dipping, so I'm just including a couple of pages to introduce the character, like when the characters like Sync are introduced or M are introduced. That's why I put them in there. But it's a series that has wonderful artwork. And, you know, it was the 90s, so a lot of the people that grew up reading this have now grown up, have kids of their own, and they want to go back and revisit this. We are getting an Epic Collection. Does not mean that we're not going to get an omnibus one day, but 100% that needs to be on there. Number 4, of course, Wolverine Omnibus Volume 3. I freaking cannot wait for this, because we did a Matt My X on this, too. And this is the Larry Hama and Mark Silvestri years. This has one of my favorite standalone Wolverine stories of all time. And for the covers, of course, yeah, okay, standard edition cover, awesome. The 3 claws, come on, man, you got 3 claws. Wolverine Volume, what? 3 claws. It's kind of ridiculous, but marketing, right? But, hear me out. For the direct market cover, I went with issue number 50. And that could be our very first die cut cover. I don't know if y'all remember, but when you bought issue number 50, the artwork is behind the claws, the 3 holes that the claws made. And we can do that with the dust jacket. That would be awesome. Kind of crazy. And then, oh man, then we can get variant kind of covers, like chromium covers, holographic covers. Maybe that's a bad idea. Anyway, those are just my suggestions for that. X-Treme X-Men by Chris Claremont. Of course I want this collected. While, you know, it's probably not the most wanted X-Men story, I love it. I loved it, man. I love when Storm took her team and said, you know what? We're going to stop all these foolish games and let Grant Morrison have fun. And let, was it Chuck Austin do Uncanny X-Men? We're going to go and find the Destiny Diaries. That's what our life is going to be about. And while it started like that, it ended in something else. But we had the return of a beloved character. We had the Shadowcat Mechanics miniseries. Yeah, 100%. I would love that. You have artwork in there by Salvador La Roca. And then eventually Igor Cordy, who was drawing 3 or 4 books at the time. So his art kind of goes up and down. But La Roca's art at first is my favorite La Roca art of all time, because it's just penciled artwork. So you have the colors on top of that penciled art. Freaking awesome. Number 2. I think this was number 2 a couple of years ago. And that is X Factor Investigations Volume 1. We are getting a Peter David X Factor Omnibus. But this is the omnibus that I would love to have. This is the one that You know, it's very underrated. Not a lot of people talk about it, but the people that do talk about it have a strong, loud voice because it is that damn good. This is what happens when you take your C-list characters and Peter David just makes you care about them. This is what happens when you have all these unresolved storylines that are just dangling there from the 80s and 90s, and Peter David's like, you know what, I got this. This is the return of so many characters that you're like, oh my gosh, I missed Rain, I miss Wolfsbane, I miss Strong Guy. I never thought I would be a big fan of Strong Guy, but it was all because of Peter David's original X-Factor run and then eventually X-Factor Investigations. Now, the complete collections went, like, we only had 2, I think, and then they decided to discontinue those. The trade paperbacks are completely out of print. This would just be mind-blowing. While I don't think it's probably on the radar to do, I do think that there's enough of a voice for that to happen eventually one day. There are no honorable mentions because, well, I just wanted to limit myself to 20 and make it harder. I know I'm going to get butchered for not putting Dazzler in there or a Storm Omnibus, but I'm sorry, they almost made the list. There were a lot of others like Uncanny X-Men Reloaded. That's not the Chuck Austin one. The Return of Chris Claremont, Reload. And see, I'm already doing an honorable list. Not an honorable list. No way. Let's go back. Number 1, do you even have to ask? Uncanny X-Men Volume 5. Hells yes. Oh my gosh. Come on. I know it's probably not going to happen for another couple of years just because of the way that things have been going. I mean, there used to be about 7 years in between book volumes. Then it was 4 years. Last time I think it was only 2.5 years, almost 3. The Masterworks are there though. But this is the one that caused the big ruckus for us in Map My X. We were arguing. I still stand by my statement that I think there's enough material for 2 Omnis between Volumes 4 and the Mutant Massacre. And that's because if you're gonna include the X-Factor issues in there, that's gonna fatten this book up. But I did put everything here. I mean, this is a huge book if they put all of this in that book. But I think there'll probably be 2. But not gonna give them any ideas. Yes, of course I want this. Oh my gosh, then we would have definitely everything from Volume 1 all the way until the Age of Apocalypse, because we still don't have the Road to Onslaught Omnibus. But that would be so amazing to look at my bookshelf and realize this is not just 17 years worth of work from one man's life, but also just all these other creators that help, make these wonderful stories about these phenomenal characters that I've fallen in love with over the years. And to look at my shelf, man, that would just put a big smile on my face. Now, if these books ever come out, don't forget to check out our sponsor, CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online source for collected editions up to 50% off retail price. Cheap Graphic Novels prides itself on excellent packaging, so your stuff gets to you in excellent condition, and they have amazing customer service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And for all you Minties that are watching, if you're a first-time customer, don't forget to mention that Near Mint Condition sent you their way for a promotional credit on free shipping on your next order. Now, this is only for U.S. customers. CheapGraphicNovels.com, your source for the hottest books with deep discounts, customer service, and excellent shipping that will keep you coming back for more. And that was my top 20 most wanted X-Men Omnibus. By all means, please let me know in the comments down below what your top 20 X-Men related Omnis would be. Top 10, top 1. And I'll be doing the Batman list, the Absolute list, the Gallery Edition list. And yeah, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please think about subscribing, share the video. This was the Uncanny Omar, and this was so much fun to put together. Now I need to go back and read X-Men to finish out my X-Men reading order part 6. More importantly, everyone, please stay healthy, stay safe, and much love.